Friends, I'm gonna need a boost to get through this video. Can I get a whoa, Jose?
Whoa, Jose!
I was not ready.
At least I get to talk about it with Jose.
Married with Children was one of the most controversial hits in television history. It was beloved by its audience, reviled by critics, and more than once the target of censorship. It was a brash, loud, obnoxious show about a working-class family that would wring each other's neck for a spoonful of chili. This spicy sitcom was the antithesis of family TV comedy in the 1980s and 90s. To understand how a show like this even got on the air in the first place, we have to set the clock back to before the idea was a glimmer in the eyes of its creators and start with the founding of the Fox television network. In the 1980s, there were only 3 major TV networks in the United States: NBC, ABC, and CBS, and this had more or less been the case for decades. Rupert Murdoch, through his media conglomerate News Corporation, wanted to enter into the network TV market under the banner of 20th Century Fox, the famed movie studio which Murdoch had recently acquired. Murdoch spent $2.5 billion purchasing TV stations in major markets throughout the US, and nearly $600 million purchasing TCF, 20th Century Fox's TV production studio. He would create a new network, the Fox Broadcasting Company, or FBC. This was quickly rebranded to the much catchier name of Fox. The new network, the fourth of its kind on American televisions, launched on October 9th, 1986, with its only original programming being a late-night chat show starring Joan Rivers, creatively titled The Late Show. The show didn't last more than a few months, but Fox upped the stakes in 1987, launching 2 nights of original programming on Saturdays and Sundays. The Saturday lineup was pretty forgettable, with shows such as The New Adventures of Beans Baxter and Women in Prison, which I assume isn't a porno. On the other hand, Sunday nights introduced the world to both Johnny Depp in 21 Jump Street and The Simpsons on The Tracy Ullman Show. It also introduced us to the Bundys, stars of the sitcom Married with Children. A young executive at Fox, Garth N. Sear, tapped Michael Moy and Ron Levitt, the duo responsible for the sitcom Silver Spoons and It's Your Move. Without much money to offer the pair, and Sear instead gave them something even more alluring: creative control in shaping a sitcom however they saw fit.
The perks were, we didn't get network notes, no testing, research and development, all of the usual red tape and crap. And this is what they sold us.
Sitcoms of that era typically featured happy, well-functioning families like the kind you'd see on The Cosby Show, Growing Pains, or Family Ties. The successes of these shows led to a host of imitators. Levitt and Moy were determined not to follow suit. They suspected that the American public was ready for something different, a show that didn't wrap saccharine messages into a family-friendly package.
Your life sucks, and they all have clean houses and hug at the end. And Ron and Mike wanted to do a show where no matter what happened, after you turned it off, you could feel a little bit better about yourself.
Speaking to Rolling Stone in 1989, Levitt and Moy described what they thought of TV that had a message. "I can't believe that you need your morality taught by the kids on facts of life," Levitt says. "Yeah," Moy says, "if you want to watch a show and learn about premarital sex, let Alf teach you." The original concept of the show was inspired by the acts of 2 popular comedians at the time, Sam Kinison and Roseanne Barr.
Best thing about marriage is that these are connected. They don't come on. Because if they did, your wife would take it as soon as you got married. She'd go, "You're married now, you won't be needing that."
Like clean stuff and cook stuff and help them with their little problems like eye care. I'd rather lay there on the couch criticizing others and then run all the charge cards up to the limit.
The idea of these two being married to one another is the spark that got this show going. The comedians were even supposedly approached to star in it, only for both to turn down their respective roles. Though years later, creator Michael Moy would say that if this casting option was seriously considered, he was never consulted about it. Levitt and Moy preferred the actors cast in the roles to be unknowns without pre-existing personas. They wanted the Bundy family to be a unique creation. Together, they wrote a pilot script that thumbed its nose at sitcom conventions. It was a pilot that would be a game changer. Although the existence of this series is held up as an example of how times have changed, as if this show could never be produced today because the politically correct have taken over the airwaves and destroyed comedy, it's worth noting that when that pilot script was first seen by the network, it wasn't warmly received. The hands-off approach promised to Levitt and Moy would eventually vanish, and suddenly the research department came in with suggestions of making the Bundys more loving.
And that's when Ron
uttered, and I total credit, uttered the famous line, and we would have every other effing sitcom in the history of television. And with that, we got up and walked out.
Levitt and Moy resisted input from the research department, and they were backed by Ann Sear. But luck was on their side as well. Fox was a new network and in desperate need of content, so they were given far more leeway than they might have gotten on another network. With their debut only a few weeks away, the Fox executives didn't have time to plug up holes in their schedule. It wasn't the more lax standards towards political correctness that got Married with Children on the airwaves. The real cause is more likely the unique circumstances in which this series was created around. I suspect that worked in the favor of Levitt and Moy getting their way on making this the show they wanted to see. And the show they wanted starred an unconventional family. The Bundys were headed by its patriarch, Al Bundy, played by Ed O'Neill. A dramatic actor with no comedy experience, O'Neill was one of the last actors cast after a very lengthy search. It was his unique take on the character that really sealed the role for him. Resigned to his fate of being married to a wife who sat around all day with kids who treated him like a cash machine, all while working at a job he hated, selling women's shoes. The perpetual loser, often seen with a hand stuffed down the front of his pants, Al had a rough charm to him that made him an underdog you wanted to root for, even when he was ogling women or stealing from innocent people. He had a strange magnetism to him. Al Bundy would define Ed O'Neill's career for a long time to come.
Hello, operator. This is Al Bundy. Hello! Am I truly nothing? Could the neighborhood children be right?
Gee, what's the matter, honey?
Well, I called the mayor's office, and as soon as I told him I was Al Bundy...
Where's the TV guy?
Al's wife, Peggy, was played by Katie Sagal, and her fiery personality was completed with her signature tall red hair. Originally written as a couch potato, it was Katie Sagal who decided to play Peg as someone who saw herself as a hot chick married to a loser, and she helped define her unique fashion sense, taken from the look of a housewife in the 1960s. It created a vision of Peggy as a mother you wouldn't see on other TV shows. Peggy was the anti-housewife. She would sooner spend the day watching Oprah and eating bonbons than go grocery shopping or talk to her children.
There are two things Peggy Bundy doesn't do. Number one, cook, clean, sew, vacuum, iron, and parent. And number two, exercise.
The Bundy children, Kelly and Bud, were originally played by Tina Caspery and Hunter Carson. They even filmed the series pilot with the two of them, but the producers felt they didn't quite fit into the role, and they were recast. Christina Applegate and David Faustino would take their place. Although they were loud and bratty from the get-go, these characters would be more meaningfully defined as the series progressed. The only constant throughout the series was their bitter bickering.
Bud's in love. I am not. He's blushing, Mom. She's pregnant, Dad.
Stuff a bra.
Pick a nose.
Eat toe rot. Lick roadkill.
Chew Dad's socks.
Eat Mom's food.
The Bundys were joined by their neighbors, Steve and Marcy Rhodes. David Garrison was the first person cast for the series, having worked with Levitt and Moy on It's Your Move. Steve Rhodes was the smarmy, yuppie newlywed next door who walked with an unearned sense of accomplishment, the complete opposite of Al.
Well, maybe we could loan you the money.
Excuse us.
No, please. Money is important to me. They are not.
His wife Marcy, played by Amanda Bearse, grew considerably throughout the series, going from a demure woman who subtly controlled her husband to an outspoken feminist who embodied the worst of liberal hypocrisy.
I love to go to the dentist. A man in white hovering over me while I'm trapped, helpless in a chair. He cleans me. He flosses me. His instrument's alive in my mouth. And just when I think I can't take anymore, he says, "Good girl, Marcy. You can spit now."
And last, but certainly not least, was the Bundys' faithful dog, Buck, played by a Briard conveniently named Buck. This very good boy would typically be seen sitting around the Bundy living room pondering the many mysteries of the universe. The world was introduced to the Bundy family for the first time on April 5th, 1987. The pilot for this show established a few basics right from the get-go. First of all, the kids do not get along.
I hate you. Good.
We also see the role money plays in the cash-strapped Bundy household. It's what the kids expect from Al instead of love, and it's how Peg controls him.
Before you go, I would just like to say 3 things. The bank book is in both of our names. The credit cards are in both of our names. And the stores are still open.
Al working in the shoe store shows us another familiar sight, him struggling with a heavy-set customer.
Come on, Arnold. We're leaving.
I want a balloon.
You've already got one.
And that was the first of many, many fat woman jokes. These jokes were defense mechanisms for Al, a way of striking back against customers who treat him poorly, and, indirectly, a blow against the horrible life he finds himself trapped in. It doesn't excuse the jokes, of course, but it does give us some context to understand where Al is coming from. An ignorant man broken by his crappy job, striking out at an easy target. We also meet a small addition to the cast, the character Luke Ventura, played by Rich Scheidner, Al's coworker at the shoe store. He appeared in a few episodes in season 1, but disappeared by the time the second season rolled around. His job was to be the single guy who would make Al regret getting married.
Hey, Al. Meet Tawny. Al's married.
Luke Ventura also gives me the chance to mention the naming convention for characters on this show. Most people assume the Bundys were named after serial killer Ted Bundy, but they were actually named after pro wrestler King Kong Bundy. The Rhodeses were named after Dusty Rhodes, and Luke Ventura was named after Jesse the Body Ventura.
Is it okay if my family comes for a visit? Well, it doesn't really matter what you say. Besides, how bad can it be?
We're here!
The second act of the show is taken up by a visit from Steve and Marcy Rhodes, the newlyweds who have just moved in next door to the Bundys. Steve and Marcy are, well, they're not like the Bundys.
I feel that sports glorify violence and competition, and I don't think it's psychologically healthy. When we have a child, we don't want it to grow up with that winning is the only thing attitude. A child is better off not being exposed to sports.
You're gonna neuter him too?
And this really encapsulates the relationship between the Bundys and the Rhodes in these first few seasons. The gentle sensibilities of Steve and Marcy are mocked and degraded by Al and Peg.
It's like when you're sitting somewhere and they come over and they say to you, "What are you thinking?" And you start thinking, you know, if I wanted you to know, I'd be talking.
You've got a good thing going. Don't start letting him have a good time alone.
But we still have a good time together.
Then why is he staying up?
And soon the Bundys have pulled the Rhodeses into their misery.
I demand to know what you do late at night after I've gone to bed. Are you having fun alone, Steve?
No, I just like to stay up and think.
What are you thinking?
Well, if I wanted you to know, I'd... Al, I'll see you next week at the game.
Peggy, I think we'll be spending a lot of time together. Come on, Steve. We've got to talk.
Oh, make it quick. I'm gonna watch boxing.
You'll watch nothing.
When the Rhodeses show up, I can't help but be reminded of Edward Albee's play, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? The story of an older married couple that invites over newlyweds for dinner and then subjects them to a night of mind games. In that play, George and Martha, named for the first U.S. president and his wife, contrast the illusions and promises of America. We see echoes of that in Married with Children, though in this case the promise of the happy nuclear family is being undermined by the miserable reality of the Bundy clan. And while the Rhodeses think their lives are on a different track, Al and Peggy are ready to pull them back down to reality. Or at least their version of reality. The style of comedy is undeniably a farce, with over-the-top acting and jokes that slap you in the face. The show's sense of humor was rapid and constant. Even though some of it is problematic, particularly Al's one-man war against overweight women, quite a bit of it stands up surprisingly well, especially considering it was written over 30 years ago. The pilot premiered with Little fanfare and even smaller ratings, Fox was still an unknown and had trouble attracting an audience who weren't even sure how to tune into the channel. That said, Married with Children quickly became its top sitcom and even got a slightly warm reception from some critics. Over the years, that would change though. A major topic in the first season is Al's manhood in the modern world. Al is very much a relic, beholden to his days as a high school football star, bitter that his life peaked at 18. Now his dreams are much simpler, like wanting an extra bathroom that's all his own.
Geez, when did men become such losers? Used to be so great to be a man. Women were there to please us. They'd look after the kids and we'd go out and have a good time. That's the natural order of things. What happened, Steve?
Well, Al...
I'll tell you what happened, Steve. Somebody told women they should start enjoying sex, too. That was the beginning of the end. Now, they like it, but it's work for us. Everything's work for us. It's this equality thing. It's killing us. Einstein had his own room. You think Einstein invented the theory of relativity in his wife's exercise room? No. He was in his own room with the door closed.
Al arguing that a man deserves a room of his own is a direct inversion of Virginia Woolf's essay, A Room of One's Own, a feminist work which argued for women to have space to enter the literary tradition. Al very explicitly opines for the days when men had all the privileges and women had, well, all the chores and the children. And Al argues for these good old days using feminist rhetoric. And keep in mind, this is Al talking about being an oppressed man in 1987. Al is right about his life sucking. He's a working class man trying to support a family in a world that's making it tougher all the time, but instead of complaining about low wages or lack of benefits, he mistakenly shifts the blame onto women wanting equal rights. Al is a reactionary. One of the binds the series puts us in is that Al is also our hero. Although he would remain explicitly anti-woman throughout the series, what's surprising is to see how the audience very quickly started taking his side of things. In season 1, there were still some pushback, like with this line.
Look, I'm not sexist. I'm just saying women don't know nothing.
This shows us a version of Al that is meant to be a fool to be laughed at, not a hero to be supported. But even in the first few seasons, he wasn't completely unredeemable, and he had a few genuinely admirable qualities. Strangely enough, Al has a number of opportunities to hook up with beautiful women throughout the series, but he manages to stay faithful to Peg throughout it all. In the first season episode, Al loses his cherry, we see Al tempted by one of the many vacuous blondes that will inhabit this series.
I'm looking for a serious commitment. Someone will stay the night.
Then I gotta think there's some guy out there for you.
Al eventually does the right thing.
Listen, you're really, really great, and any guy would be lucky. I mean, jackpot lucky to be with you. But I hope you'll understand. See, I've been married a long time, and it just wouldn't be right. You got any pictures of yourself? No, that wouldn't be right either. Listen, I gotta go.
He goes back to Peg, but he does make it a little creepy.
Oh, gee, Al. I'm so glad you're home.
Wear this.
So Al is gross, we all know that, but he shows us some character in this episode, not cheating on his wife, which, as we can see from Peg at home, would really hurt her. This is about establishing Al, for all his faults, isn't a complete bastard. What's interesting is how the show presents characters. They're absurd and over the top, and the Cherry Sister in particular play into a gross male fantasy of the vacant blonde, but they're being deployed in a slightly more sophisticated way. The temptation of Al is a genuine test because it risks the very foundations of the premise, that is, a married couple at the center of this entire sitcom. The show can't continue if the married couple in Married with Children are no longer married. The idea behind the comedy here is that Al and Peg don't mean the nasty things they say to each other, and deep down there's some real love there. If Al or Peg cheated on the other, it would violate that implication. What this show has at its core is the idea of a deep love that transcends romance and lust. The fact that it acknowledges temptation is actually kind of realistic. Al and the Bundys generally are rough people who do bad things, but they aren't completely unredeemable. Funnily enough, this is how the seed is planted, taking them from being objects of ridicule to underdogs the audience can cheer for. I also really like this episode because Peg apparently watches my YouTube channel.
Hey, Jose is a very nice man, and his English is coming along just fine.
Thanks, Peggy. The poverty of the Bundys is a huge reason as to why they live so miserably. The Bundys are the traditional nuclear family struggling to survive at a new status quo of the 1980s, and this new reality doesn't have room for the Bundys. Steve and Marcy are part of the new order, the one the Bundys sneer at. The people who move in next door who have a much happier marriage and more successful careers. They aren't massively successful, but they're doing better than the Bundys. And by the end of the season, they're already looking down at their poor neighbors, just like how everyone else looks down on the Bundys. And it must suck to feel like everyone is looking down at you.
Thank your father, kids.
Thanks, Dad.
The second season established more of the show's tone, including its tendency to tell absurd stories. It opens with a two-parter that has the Bundys going on vacation to Dumpwater, Florida. Upon getting there, they are attacked by a genuine axe murderer.
Kids, get dressed. We're leaving.
But we like it here.
Suit yourself. Peg.
Al, we are not leaving the children.
Well, what's wrong?
There's someone in our room. That's him.
And they react in typical Bundy fashion, stealing and kicking ass.
It's safe. Okay. Steal everything that's not tied down. Pack up, we'll go downstairs, get a refund, hit the road. Oh, pack this. We can always use a fork.
This is one of the many times we'll be seeing the Bundys doing both of these things. It's a gentle reminder that, while they are our protagonists and aren't as bad as a literal axe murderer, they're not so great themselves. Then again, everyone in the show's world seems to be an asshole, like the townsfolk who let the murderer off so they can keep one of their major tourist attractions.
What are you doing?
Making sure you didn't hurt him?
See, Bundy, Dumpwater ain't much of a town. We only got two things. A serial killer and the man who met Andy Griffith.
The Bundys live in a cynical world where everyone is chasing money, something the Bundys lack. In fact, the only reason Bundys were at this hellhole was because it was the only vacation they could afford. We can get an example of what wealthier Bundys might be like in Master the Possibilities. The Bundys mistakenly think they don't have to pay the bill on a credit card that was accidentally given to Buck, giving them a taste of living the sweet life.
Here we are in the same room, and not once have I thought about sitting in the car, closing the garage door, and letting the engine purr me to sleep.
I know, sweetie. Many is the time I've thought of you doing that, too.
It also reveals that they believe a few things about being rich, like it buys you social permission to be a jerk. It's here we see that the Bundys are much happier when they aren't fighting over the few scraps they have.
We're obnoxious, but we'll give you a big tip.
Well, then it's okay.
Everyone in the world is obsessed with money, and the Bundys are showing us what happens to a family without any. It's a powerful counterpoint to the obsessive consumerism of the 1980s. The chase for money makes both the rich and poor much harsher to everyone around them. One of the memorable moments in Season 2 happens in the episode You Better Watch Out, where a mall promotion featuring a parachuting Santa went awry.
Ladies and gentlemen, we don't know where he is.
I really appreciate the contrast in reactions between the Rhodeses and the Bundys.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Come on, Marcy, cheer up. It could have been worse. He could have landed on the picket fence.
While this might have ruined Christmas for any other family, the Bundys have a rare victory when they realize Santa's sack was filled with coupons for the new mall. This really captures the spirit of Married with Children. Christmas, the traditional family holiday, is really just about the presents, and the Bundys cut through the sentimental mask that disguises that materialism. The Bundy house is where Santa goes to die, but he can leave the presents. A fun bit of trivia is that, according to show co-creator Michael Moy, the idea of Santa falling to his death in a failed stunt at Christmas time was taken from the childhood memories of one of the writers on the show. On second thought, maybe that trivia isn't so much fun. And before leaving Season 2 entirely, it also gave us one of my favorite running gags in the show, the Bundy cheer.
Hey, kids, come on over here. It's time for the Bundy cheer.
Oh, no.
Come on over here. Whoa, Bundy!
I thought it was a hit.
Well, some woman in Michigan didn't like it.
I've purposely avoided talking about another thing Married with Children was increasingly getting a rep for, and that's having beautiful men and women, although more often than not women, showing some skin. This helped attract the younger demographic Fox had been hunting for, but the network was growing increasingly wary of the salacious imagery and plot lines of the series. This set the stage for the notorious episode Her Cups Runneth Over, written by Stacey Sprung and Marcy Vosberg. In this episode, Peg's birthday is ruined when she finds out her favorite bra is being discontinued. Al and Steve go on a road trip to a special lingerie store in Wisconsin to track down Peg's favorite bra, and engage in some saucy antics featuring women in lingerie. This episode happened to catch the eye of Terry Ricolta, a housewife in Michigan. The story goes that she had been letting her children have free reign of the television when she noticed they were watching this particular episode of Married with Children. Ricolta was so upset she was moved to call into the network to complain about the show. Fox, being new to the whole network thing, didn't have a department to field complaint calls, so amazingly, they forwarded the call to one of the writers responsible for the episode, Marcy Vosberg. Both women provided their own versions of that conversation.
So I answered the phone, and there's this woman saying, I saw your show last night. It was absolutely offensive and everything. And I said, well, I'm really sorry. And I can understand that. My mom doesn't really like the show very much either. But we're just trying something a little bit new. And I said, we sort of take a British approach to censorship. If it's offensive, you can always change the channel.
Very condescending tone. She said, this is a body program. We are pushing the envelope of television. Our viewing audience is an adult, beer-drinking male, 18 to 35 years old. She said, and finally, Mrs. Ricolta, if you don't like what you're seeing, I suggest to you that you just stand up, walk over to the television, and turn it off.
Ricolta, undeterred by the phone call, wrote to the heads of the various companies advertising their products on Married with Children, and she convinced many of them to start pulling their ads. Married with Children was being attacked by a one-woman boycott. An article from the New York Times describes her success. Procter & Gamble, McDonald's, Tam Brands, and Kimberly-Clark have instructed their advertising agencies not to buy further time on the program Married with Children. In an interview, the Michigan woman, Terry Ricolta, said she has objected to the program because of its blatant exploitation of women and sex and anti-family attitudes. But what parts of this episode really bothered Ricolta? I'm going to pick out a handful of the more controversial moments of this episode, at least in the eyes of someone living in 1988, and I want you to guess which two were the ones that, for Terry Ricolta, crossed the line.
Do you know what happened if men had breasts?
We wouldn't need women anymore.
And if you had what other men have, I wouldn't need batteries anymore.
Don't be embarrassed. We often cater to people like you. Now, what size does your boyfriend like to see you in?
No. You don't understand. We're married. And not to each other, to women.
And if I was gay, I'd like to think I could do better than him.
Steve, aren't you ashamed of yourself?
Oh, come on, Al. She was asking for it. You see how she's dressed.
Isn't there something we can do about this?
We can dance.
Happy birthday, Peggy! If you were my boyfriend, would you like this? Or do you think he'd like it better without the bra, like this? Yeah, you're right. I don't need the bra.
Well, I gotta go. Bar exam tomorrow.
Okay, so which of those two clips really set off Ricolta? Let's go back to the Times article to find out. In an interview, she said she was appalled by the sexual innuendo and treatment of women on the program, particularly its references to homosexuality and a sequence featuring a woman publicly removing her bra. So it was the reference to gay men and the hand bra. While the hand bra I can understand, it's pretty chilling to think mentioning characters might be gay was enough to offend someone. It's a strong reminder of how far gay rights have come in the last 30 years. The Ricolta boycott, although seemingly a threat at first, backfired pretty spectacularly. It gave Married with Children a national spotlight, and what was already the most popular show on Fox got a huge boost in the ratings from people coming by to see what all the fuss was about. Here's an excerpt from an Entertainment Weekly article in 1990, 1 year after the boycott began. The show is as raucous as ever, the audience has grown, and advertisers are still advertising. A number of sponsors that wrote letters of support to Ricolta have continued to run commercials in Married. Some could even be called heavy advertisers. In short, free speech is safe. From Terry Ricolta. Ricolta, who has since formed Americans for Reasonable Television, a media watchdog organization that publishes a monthly newsletter for 2,000 subscribers, concedes that her campaign brought more publicity to Married and probably more viewers. "I'm still waiting for that fruit basket from Fox," she says. As the ratings have climbed, so have the rates charged for 30 seconds of commercial time. Last spring, a half minute went for $65,000. These days, the cost is $100,000 to $120,000, roughly equal to the rates of an NBC Sunday night movie. It was so hot, Married with Children managed to set a record-breaking increase in viewership. According to Ricolta, her real problem was with Married with Children airing before 9 p.m., which apparently made it more likely to find its way in front of younger audiences. At the time, the sitcom had been airing at 8:30 p.m. Fox did push it back to 9 p.m. the following season, though it was moving with a significantly larger audience, and it would grow larger still. The network also had one strange reaction to the boycott: to take the upcoming episode, "I'll See You in Court," off the schedule entirely. It was an episode about the Bundys and Rhodeses visiting a love motel where their night of passion was secretly recorded, leading to a showdown where they take the hotel owners to court. Fox considered this episode too controversial for television, and it didn't air until several years later, well after the series ended, on June 18, 2002. Although a decent episode, it didn't really live up to the hype. Season 3 had a few other highlights I want to mention before moving on. Both Bud and Kelly became more developed as characters in this season. For instance, Bud started committing hair crimes. As a hair choice like this would suggest, Bud's journey through puberty was a lonely one. From here on out, we'll be seeing Bud, the relatively intelligent Bundy, feel the need to prove his manhood by hooking up with a girl, or, in the majority of cases, as close as he can get to one.
"The day I stooped low enough to date a mannequin is the day I truly earned the name Bundy."
On the complete opposite end of the spectrum, Kelly proves herself to be very successful in her dating life, although she also distinguishes herself as the dimmest of the Bundys.
I'm Kelly. Remember we met in the boys' shower the other day?
Oh, yeah, the soup girl.
Soap girl. SOPE.
I think this is where Christina Applegate really started to distinguish herself. Although the Kelly character would be trapped in this endless cycle of being the dumb blonde who hooks up with countless guys, Applegate was able to deliver her lines with a refreshing energy that really demonstrated she had a talent for comedy. She'd go on to be one of the breakout stars of the show, and part of it was being able to pull off moments like this one.
Alright, so I've been playing it cool. You know, a little smile, a little wink, a little, "Hey Bruno, look at this." He's on the hook and I'm just about to land him. He thinks I'm cool, but if he sees me wearing these horseshoes, he's gonna go for some other slut.
Let's go upstairs and have sex right now.
Honey, you know what I always say? No.
One of the well-established tropes of this series up to this point is that Al sees having sex with Peg as a chore.
Okay, Al. Pop in the movie, pop in a breath mint, and let's coax the mummy out of his crypt.
I don't want to have sex. You're my wife, for God's sake.
It's not that he doesn't find Peg attractive because she's lost her looks or anything like that. It's because she's his wife. It's the routine of sex that has reduced Al's interest in it, at least with Peggy. To compensate, Peggy uses a variety of schemes to trick Al into bed. Small content warning for sexual violence because a few of these clips are a bit disturbing. Skip ahead to the time scene below if you'd like to avoid this section.
Well, I already told you I needed you. What else do you want? Oh, Peg, it's light out, for God's sake. We'll be able to see each other. You know I hate that.
While it's typically done through guile or some other form of manipulation, the more problematic aspect of this becomes apparent when roles are reversed in the 4th season premiere. In Hot Off the Grill, Al decides to celebrate Labor Day with a barbecue.
Oh, this is going to be just great. You know, there's nothing like spending Labor Day with the family and good food and good friends. Oh, God, what a charade. Oh, God.
Al, using his day off to its fullest, demands Peg start cleaning and doing other chores around the house. This turns Al on.
Now what little dirty job do you have for me? Oh, no. Oh, I'm so tired.
And this happens several times this episode, the running gag being that instead of Al not wanting to have sex, it's Peg who doesn't want to do it because she's just too tired. Cut out the laughter and applause, and this scene looks dramatically different. Perhaps it might have seemed like an easier subject for humor when the big strong man is acquiescing to the weaker wife, but that in and of itself is problematic. Non-consensual sex, whether it comes through physical force or mental manipulation, is sexual assault. Al and Peg have somehow worked it into their strange marriage, but there's still something very disturbing about making light of it. Certain aspects of the show have aged surprisingly well, but this isn't one of them. If anything, looking at this from 2020, it often feels more uncomfortable than funny. One major highlight for season 4 was the hour-long special, It's a Bundyful Life. As the name suggests, it's a Married with Children take on the classic Christmas movie, It's a Wonderful Life. Rather than sum up the first part myself, I'll let Al's poetry fill you in.
All right, here we go. It was the night before Christmas, and all through the house, no food was a-stirring, not even a mouse. Stockings were hung round Dad's neck like a tie, along with a note that said, presents or die. Children were plotting all night in their beds, while the wife's constant whining was splitting his head. But Daddy had money this year in the bank. Then they closed up early. Now Dad's in the tank.
In the second half of the story, Al's repairing of the Christmas lights goes wrong.
It's a wonderful life. I don't know. Sometimes I think it might have been better if I was never born.
And Al is met by his guardian angel, Sam Kinison, the very comedian who inspired the character of Al Bundy.
I'm Al Bundy.
Would you stop playing Nintendo up there for a minute? What kind of mess have you got me into? What have you done to me?
As you might have guessed, Al gets to see what the world would have been like had he not been born.
Oh, Budrick.
I saved myself for marriage.
Oh, come on! The football team retired her jersey.
And we meet the man who takes Al's place.
Saw mommy kissing Santa Claus.
That's Ted McGinley playing Norman Jablonski. We'll be seeing more of him in season 5 in a completely different role.
But gee, this was fun! What do we do next? Go back in time to the day I should have been conceived? Watch my father invent the condom?
Things aren't going well for guardian angel Sam Kinison. Turns out it's very difficult to give Al a reason to want to live. Until...
Wait a second. I want to be back with my family.
Why?
Look at them. They're happy. Not a care in the world. You think I'm going to let that happen after all the grief they put me through? I want to live!
And Al returns home.
Bud, quick. What's more important, love or money?
Well, money, Dad. I can always rent love.
Kelly, quick. What's the color of an orange?
No multiple choice? You mean just straight off the top of my head?
Don't worry about it, Pumpkin. Peg, bake me some Christmas cookies.
Drop dead, Al.
All right. I've got my family back.
This was a twist on the It's a Wonderful Life concept that's actually original, even if it's just an inversion. And what it so beautifully captures is the power of spite to someone in a world they think has turned against them. If someone were to say the world would be better off if you didn't exist, that can create some real bitterness. Fighting back against that is at the heart of who Al is. He won't go away, even if it would make the world a better place. This speaks to that aggrieved reactionary narrative so well. The old status quo being undoubtedly replaced means guys like Al are getting a smaller piece of the pie, or in Al's case, the smaller piece of the pie he was promised in his youth. This wasn't the way things were supposed to turn out for him. But I need to stress, Al being erased isn't speaking to a reality, just a feeling that it's happening. Married with Children is presenting us the world through a warped lens, one that sneers at the facade of the happy family that other sitcoms pretend exist, or at least pretend exist in every home. Married with Children isn't intentionally pushing an aggrieved white conservative male narrative on purpose. It's that the very conceit of the series carries that implicit bias. On its original broadcast, this became the highest rated episode of the series, achieving 31.4 million viewers. A major turning point in season 4 was the growing influence of the Bundys on their neighbors, the Rhodeses, and I don't just mean the increasing animosity between Al and Marcy.
But doesn't anybody know this is against the law?
So is dressing up a chicken and calling it your wife.
Chicken. Why does he keep calling me a chicken?
By the time the 4th season rolls around, the once happy newlyweds are well on their way to becoming Al and Peg.
When I was dating you, I had a few milk bones slipped into my pocket.
I was pretty. My mother told me so.
Compared to your mother, you were.
So now you don't like my mother?
What's not to like? A 60-year-old woman who played the drums.
Aside from the bickering, there was the added pain of Steve getting wrapped up in one of Al's schemes, a shoe-themed hotline.
The trial had everything. Crime, that was Mr. Rhodes. He lost his job, you know. And then there was an honest-to-goodness fit. That was Mrs. Rhodes. She got demoted to drive-up window teller.
While it seemed like Al was shaping Steve into him, he started to more closely resemble Peggy.
I've been thinking, I don't really want to work. It's boring. I'm having fun not working. Peggy says...
Well, Marcy says you're working, leech man.
The degradation of their marriage also reveals more to the Steve and Marcy characters. Their veneer of tolerant, open-minded liberals is ripped away to reveal, much like the Bundys, what turns them on is money.
I mean, when I first married Steve, he was a greedy, materialistic pig. He'd step on an old lady for $1. God, how he excited me.
Though they don't quite go full Bundy, they not only have the experience of having had money, but there are no kids to weigh them down. Marcy becoming Al is very interesting since the bitterness of working a low-paying job is almost instantaneous. This is apparently what low-wage work will do to someone in this world, particularly if they're in a single-income family and their partner refuses to work. It's taxing not just financially, but psychologically. It also shows us the precariousness of the relatively lavish lifestyle of the Rhodeses. They're one firing and demotion away from their lives and marriages crumbling. All of this was setting up the groundwork for the first major change in the show's cast, the departure of David Garrison. Although there was no bad blood between him or any involved in the show's production, in his heart he was primarily a theater actor, and he left to pursue that interest. In the context of the show, Steve's departure would be explained as him running off to be a park ranger, but he would be back a few more times over the years. Season 4 also gave us one more important first. We finally get to hear Buck speak.
Let's see. What channel is Wheel of Fortune on?
It's 7, just like yesterday and the day before.
Oh, it's 7. I thought it was 7.
Yeah, right.
Buck has many internal monologues over the years, and even a few Buck-centric episodes. He was voiced by Kevin Curran, a writer for the series, though in the handful of Buck-centric episodes, where Buck has more than a handful of lines, he's voiced by Cheech Marin.
Let's rock.
Married with Children continued to get even more popular with the start of its 5th season, which is pretty easy to understand when you look at what other shows were out there.
I do not want to miss the special premiere of Grandmaster and the Gopher. It's an hour drama with comic overtones about a rapper who goes to the center of the earth and raps with the mole people. Oh, and look, Sally Struthers is the queen.
Even the opening to season 5 starts with a great moment that captures what this show is all about.
Hey, Chicago, what a day for a daydream. Show me an unhappy man today, and I'll show you
What you may have noticed in many of these clips is how raucous the audience is getting. Back in season 4, we started getting loud ovations from pretty much every first entrance of a member of the principal cast. Married with Children was very quickly distinguishing itself for having one of the most vocal audiences. If you listen closely to this clip, you can hear someone shout, "Don't do it." And this was far from being the only time something like this happened. You can hear the audience shouting out in a number of scenes, and this is my favorite example.
Everybody has the start of a whole new life except for you and the dog.
How much do people love the show if they're cheering a dog getting a hookup? In an article for New York Magazine, Hollywood sound engineer John Bickelhaupt describes his time on the show. Married with Children, he says, was amazing. I worked on that show for years and years, and honestly, I had little to do except clean up edits. That owed a lot to careful casting of the crowd. Married, he says, often had audiences packed with Marines and service people who responded to the show's aggressive, anti-PC humor.
I remember shows when, we would have to just say, keep it down, guys, because we couldn't hear each other.
The audience serves as a good indicator of where the show will be heading in the future. The strongest reactions were typically for sexy women or anti-PC humor, and both would become more prominent in later season. Here's an example from just one season later.
Am I the only one that senses that slowly but surely our freedoms are being taken away? The freedom to park, the freedom not to fasten your seatbelt, to not to worry about having a working muffler. Back then, you knew a man was coming by the black smoke belching out the back of his American car. As he tossed beer cans and French fry packages out the window.
The laughter makes sense, but the cheering? Al is supposed to be in the wrong, the out-of-touch loser to be mocked because the audience is supposed to feel as though they're better than him. But by being the star of a beloved sitcom, all that goodwill is turning him into a folk hero. And Al, using a white reactionary victimhood narrative, creates an implicit support for that point of view. Season 5 took another big step in the show's evolution with the episode Married with Who?, where we meet our old friend Ted McGinley. Only now he's playing a different character, Marcy's new husband, Jefferson Darcy. The marriage was a product of a one-night stand.
It's just that I can hardly believe I'm now Mrs. Darling? What's your last name?
Darcy.
Marcy Darcy? I'm now Marcy Darcy? What have I done?
The dynamic here is Jefferson is a mooching pretty boy conman living off of Marcy's wealth. This wasn't the first time Ted McGinley was a late addition to a sitcom. Before coming to Married with Children, he joined the cast of both Happy Days and The Love Boat in their later seasons, something that was cutely referenced in later episodes of Married with Children.
What was it like working on Happy Days?
I'm telling you, kid, I was not on Happy Days, okay? My name is Darcy, Jefferson Darcy.
Was that your name on Love Boat?
Oh, beat it!
It took the audience a while to warm up to Jefferson. According to McGinley, it was about 2 seasons, but in my opinion, I think he fit into the cast quite nicely, right from the get-go.
That's my douche!
Oh, yeah? Yeah? Well, you touched my girly fizz.
Come on, give me that! It's mine! I
Damn it, Al! Now, we're both men. There's plenty of room in feminine hygiene for the both of us. All right? Let's shake on it.
With Married with Children riding so high, it was only natural for Fox to want to capitalize on that success, and that's how we got the first attempt at creating a spin-off. In Oldies But Youngins, we meet Al's friend Charlie Verducci, played by Joseph Bologna, whose son is dating Kelly. His name is Vinny, and he's played by a young Matt LeBlanc.
So, just where were you while I was wasting my life away with my family?
Well, I wanted to get you something nice.
Garfield spoils the picnic.
A few episodes later, Married with Children would go the extra mile, using its 100th episode to give audiences a stealth pilot for the spin-off show, Top of the Heap. In this episode, the only regular cast member to appear was Al in a small cameo. The rest of the time we hang out with the Verduccis, a father-son duo who are trying to hatch a forgettable plot to get rich. There was only one really great moment, and that's the part where Matt LeBlanc pretends to box with Mr. Fluffy the cat, who performed under his own name. That is such a talented cat. Top of the Heap would build on this bland episode to premiere on April 7th, 1991. It was the first and most successful of the Married with Children spin-offs, lasting a grand total of 6 episodes, not counting the pilot. A year later, the spin-off somehow got a spin-off of its own titled Vinny and Bobby, with Matt LeBlanc once again playing Vinny, only now his co-star is Robert Torti, playing his roommate Bobby Grazzo. The show made the disastrous decision to cut out the clear star of the previous series, Mr. Fluffy the Cat, but it ended up being slightly more successful, blazing past the old series' 6-episode run to reach a grand total of 7 episodes. For Matt LeBlanc's sake, a year later he would find himself on Friends and become a big star. Friends, by the way, also featured Christina Applegate, who would guest star on a few episodes playing Rachel's sister. There's no word of what happened to Mr. Fluffy the Cat, though. And one last highlight from Season 5 I need to mention is we are introduced to Al's favorite TV show, a Western titled Psycho Dad.
When you hit your gun, who's the man who kills for fun? Psycho Dad, Psycho Dad, Dad took the gun, but he loves his son. Killed his wife because he weighed a ton. Psycho Dad.
Season 6 carried the momentum of Season 5 and continued the trend of strong ratings. The Ricolta controversy was long gone, but another powerful driver of attention for the show was that, with over 100 episodes in its library, it now qualified for syndication. It was voraciously snapped up by networks, as the early seasons in particular had such underwhelming ratings in their initial run that it was like buying a bunch of forgotten episodes for a hit TV series. This brought in even more new viewers, hungry for more Married with Children. The premiere for Season 6 brought with it a major change.
We have a little announcement. Jefferson and I are pregnant.
Oh, Marcy, that's great! Honey?
Yes.
Guess what?
What?
I'm pregnant too!
The reaction from the family isn't great.
Oh my God, what have I done?
You still don't know, do you?
Kids, no matter what the future might bring, it's still nice to know that we're a family and that we'll go through things together. Who'll give me a whoa, Bundy? What do you want from me? I wasn't even awake!
The plotline was written into the series as, in real life, Katie Sagal was pregnant, and it let her appear on camera without having to hide that fact. Also, a third child is the exact sort of bad luck that Al would have. Sagal was clearly far along in her pregnancy at the time, and a few months into the new season, she would leave the series for 4 episodes. I have to talk about some heavy stuff now, so consider this a content warning, particularly for anyone who's experienced challenges during their own pregnancy or the pregnancy of a loved one. You can skip ahead to the time below if this is a sensitive topic for you. Katie Sagal's departure to have her first child took an unfortunate turn. She was 6 weeks from coming to term when she had to have an emergency cesarean section, and tragically her pregnancy ended in a stillbirth. Normally this type of information would stay private, as it so obviously should, but Sagal had been public with her pregnancy. To prevent the difficulty of dealing with questions from a nosy press, she released a statement on what had happened.
That was a devastating, and to this day is a devastating experience.
I just remember when the announcement came and the director kind of huddled us all around and told us about it, and I was like, it was just shocking.
I was really worried about her because I thought that, I knew how much she wanted the child, and then I thought, oh, now what's going to happen? How do you come back from that?
Somehow Sagal was able to return to the show less than a month after the experience, and the pregnancy was quickly written out of the series, with the early episodes revealed to be a dream Al was having. Naturally, there needed to be a moment where Al is shocked to learn that Peg is no longer pregnant.
Is she pregnant? Marcy?
Think he's crazy?
Well, he must be. He didn't ask about you.
The kids are awkwardly roped into this scene for this moment because, and this is me speculating, no one wanted to put Katie Sagal in a scene where she even had to hear references to a missing pregnancy. I think this shows how, behind the scenes, the cast and crew on Married with Children had a lot of real love and affection for one another, especially in a difficult time like this. Katie Sagal would become pregnant 2 more times during the run of the series, and happily both were delivered to term successfully. For obvious reasons, her second and third pregnancies are never referenced on the show. While Katie Sagal was away from the show, there was another important moment for the series. Amanda Bearse, who played Marcy, decided to try her hand at directing in the episode titled If I Could See Me Now, in which Al needs glasses. Although she would still appear as Marcy until the end of the series, she would go on to direct over 30 episodes of Married with Children. Season 6 also gave us the birth of a new gimmick Bud would use to attract women.
When the hat is on, I'm street rapper Grandmaster B. When it's off, I'm Bud. Got it? Now, the hat is on. Who am I?
Oh, cheer up, buttwagger B.
Why, it's Grandfather B.
There, cross-dresser B.
I'm really sorry, Grand Marshal B.
Gas passer, bass haster, what's the difference?
Even after the first 10 episodes of the season are revealed to have been a dream, as a convenient way of writing Peg and Marcy's pregnancies out of the show, the Grandmaster B persona manages to survive.
Do you also call yourself street rapper Grandmaster B, or was that a dream?
Oh, come on, Daddy. Even Bud's not pathetic enough to...
Wait a sec, Grandmaster B? Chicks would be all over me. I could wear my hat backwards. Oh man, I'm gonna go write my first rap right now.
This gimmick was inspired by real life, where David Faustino was trying to be a rapper under the name D. Lil. Faustino released an album titled Ballistics, which spawned one single titled I Told Ya. I couldn't find any sales information for this album, but since there was no follow-up, I assume it wasn't quite as popular as the Joey Lawrence album from the same time period. I don't want to get any copyright claims for playing some of D. Lil's single, so I'm going to rap a few bars for you. Here we go. So you wick whack, knick knack, tic tac, skip back. I got the funky style and you know you can't get with that. I got more flavor than the bar candy Kit Kat. And when it comes to kitty cats, I gotta have the Jimmy hats. Yeah, that was the song. Season 6 also brought us the first return of Steve Rhodes in The Egg and I. In this episode, Steve has stolen a rare hawk egg, but when he comes back for Marcy, he finds out she's moved on.
I came to reclaim my wife.
I wouldn't crawl to you if I had a date with Mel Gibson and you had the last diaphragm on Earth.
Cause we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 kids.
Season 7 is often cited as the season where everything started to take a bad turn. It was during this season that one of the show's co-creators, Michael Moy, left the series, leaving Ron Leavitt to hold it together on his own. This season also had the Bundy clan receive a new addition, 7, played by Shane Sweet. Adding a cute kid to the cast has been a gimmick on TV sitcoms for decades, and I can't think of a single time where it worked, at least in the long term. 7, the son of Peggy's hillbilly cousins, is abandoned to the Bundy family because, as bad as life is for the Bundys, Peggy's side of the family, the Wankers, were in an even worse state. Although Peg would display some surprising maternal instincts, the audience was less keen on 7. The show tried its best to bring 7 into the fold with the episode Every Bundy Has a Birthday, where the family goes to the park to celebrate 7's birthday. Sadly, being poor, they apparently don't get to use the public park.
You cannot buy a public park. I pay good taxes to support this place.
Al, you haven't paid taxes in years.
And I would feel quite the fool right now if I had.
The family bonds the only way they know how, by beating the crap out of another family.
Come on, kids! Let's kick some rich butt.
There's a lot of ass kicking in this show. We saw a similar fight in the season 5 opener, We'll Follow the Sun.
Jerry, don't you have anything better to do than to pick a fight with a moron?
Just who are you calling moron?
Your husband, you painted husband.
And countless other episodes. Sadly for 7, even this show of family solidarity wasn't enough, and he'd leave the cast before the end of the season. He mysteriously vanished in the episode Peggy and the Pirates, where Peggy tells him a thrilling story about pirates, including another guest appearance by David Garrison. This was a really fun episode. We get to see Peg fall for Pirate Al. Peg gets to be a bit of a badass, and all sorts of fun pirate capers.
You fool. I was taught to fight by the greatest teachers in the finest schools in Europe.
Oh, yeah? Well, I was taught how to fight in the street.
Peg finishes her story, and she shoos Seven away, and we never see him again. But we do get a very tiny Seven cameo in Season 8. Kinda. And before we leave Season 7, in this episode titled Christmas, we get a flashback of a very young Buck.
I want that little chuck wagon to run through the house and put food in my bowl.
There's no commentary here, I just wanted to show you Puppy Buck.
National Organization of Men Against Amazonian Masterhood.
Behind the scenes in late 1993, Amanda Bearse's sexuality jumped into the headlines when she finally went public with the fact that she was gay.
Because it was a political move. I mean, it certainly wasn't a move for publicity or self-promotion. It was a political move, my coming out. And that's something that I think will also continue. This is just the beginning, so I don't feel settled at all.
At the time, Bearse was the only network star who was out, and this happened 4 years before Ellen DeGeneres would come out in 1997. I suspect the low opinion critics had of Married with Children may have colored their reactions to this moment, garnering less publicity. As for representations of gay characters on the show, Married with Children had one episode featuring a gay character back in Season 5 in the episode titled The Dance Show. Peggy meets a handsome stranger at a dance club, hoping to trigger some of Al's jealousy. It doesn't really work, and Al sits at home unbothered and happy, until Peggy's dancing partner's husband comes knocking at the door.
You Al Bundy?
Yes, hold the applause. What do you want?
I just think you ought to know that your wife has been seeing my husband.
First off, yes, that is Dan Castellaneta, the voice of Homer Simpson, playing Pete. And yes, he did say husband, even though gay marriage was still decades away. That, in and of itself, is a powerful statement about gay relationships. But I want to focus on Al's reaction to this. This moment could have gone so many ways, and of course we begin with Al being very confused, but as he gets to know Pete, we see a surprising reaction.
Maybe it's my fault. Andy's a man about town, whereas I just like to stay home and watch a ball game.
Wait a second. You work, you cook, and you like sports?
Yeah, except for soccer. I mean, that's not really a man's game.
I love you.
Al, motivated by Pete's cooking, storms off to the dance club and confronts Pete's husband. Not because Peg's scheme to make him jealous has worked, but because he's fighting for this gay marriage to stay together.
Look, I don't care what you're doing with my wife. But you got a good man at home that any man would be proud to call his wife. He cooks, he cleans, he works. You've obviously gotten over that little he's a man thing. So what else do you want from the poor guy?
So we have Al Bundy, a man who hates his own marriage and will help tear down anyone else's, standing up to protect a gay marriage. There's something powerful about that, and surprisingly socially progressive. The show does end on a sour note, though.
I could have had anyone. I could have had Andy at the snap of a finger. He was sexy, he was hot, he was
a homo, Peg.
When it comes to sexism and misogyny, the show was not quite so enlightened. Season 8 brought us one of the most popular and one of the most problematic elements of the show, the anti-feminist group named National Organization of Men Against Amazonian Masterhood, or No Ma'am. They debuted in an episode appropriately titled No Ma'am. In this episode, Al and his buddies are dismayed to find out that their regular bowling night has been replaced by a women's-only night thanks to the efforts of Jerry Springer. Al's reaction is less than enlightened.
And where are you calling from, sir? 1952?
I wish! Ike was in the White House, women were in the kitchen, and you were in the closet.
This is indicative of a lot of small cracks Al makes when he feels threatened or challenged. It's a low-key homophobia that undoes a lot of the positive stuff we see in episodes like The Dance Show. Eventually, Al and his buddies try to ease their pain by going to their favorite strip club, which they lovingly refer to as the nudie bar. When they get there, though, it's been turned into a woman's coffee house. So Al does what any man upset with losing a place to hang out on a Thursday night would do. He forms an activist group.
Demand one. You gals want a ladies' night? Try having it in the kitchen, cooking for a man.
Eventually, Marcy doxes Al, and they get into a YouTube debate.
Oh, yeah? Well, you're a chicken!
What's really interesting here is hearing the audience take sides when Marcy and Al's debate reaches a crescendo.
We just want equality, fairness, to be appreciated. After all, you need us more than we need you.
You're in no ma'am's land now, baby!
The episode ends with Al being arrested because he's a loser and will always lose. But what happened here was a major meeting between the audience's love for Al and the reactionary conservative worldview he represents. We've spent so long sympathizing with Al, including forgiving the theft in line, so why not cheer on his anti-woman group? Even taken most generously, Al is arguing against the idea that women are trying to take over the world to subjugate men, but his evidence is pretty thin. He lost one night of the week to bowl, and his strip club is turned into a coffee shop. The latter seems more a product of capitalism wanting to appeal to a market outside of horny men. It's not much of a global feminist takeover. If this was a one-off episode, it'd be fine, but we're going to see more of No Ma'am in the future. It was a huge hit with the audience Married of Children had cultivated, one that saw Al as more of a hero to be cheered than a loser to be laughed at.
This is Miranda Veracruz de la Hoya Cardinal.
A major change for this season was the introduction of Al's co-worker, Griff, played by Harold Sylvester. Season 8 had tried and failed to give Al a co-worker to play off of at the shoe store, first with the much younger Aaron, who lasted about 5 episodes, and the very short-lived Dexter, who only lasted a single episode. Neither of them had the staying power of Griff, who would never join the principal cast, but would be a recurring character on many episodes for the rest of the series' run. As you might have noticed, he's one of the first major characters to be a person of color. Although technically Officer Dan appeared earlier in the series, he didn't get a name until season 8 and only appeared on roughly a dozen episodes. Griff would appear in over 40. While this might seem like the perfect vehicle to explore race and some issues around that, if you think this has any chance of happening, you've obviously come to the wrong show. Instead, we get a different kind of inclusivity, where Al's diverse group feels distinctly post-racial, something that might have passed for liberalism back in the day. And Griff, like all of Al's friends, becomes a member of No Ma'am to show a multicultural front against women. And No Ma'am was out in full force this season, first with a two-parter where they took a stand against breastfeeding in public. This two-parter introduced us to a number of characters that would populate this series' world. First was the Hispanic reporter named,
This is Miranda Veracruz de la Hoya Cardinal.
Yeah, that. And as the only recurring Hispanic character on the show, her being a capable journalist who seems constantly exasperated by the nonsense around her, seems like a nice positive. Although 90% of her character is just her saying her complicated name. The second half of this two-parter introduced the owner of Al's shoe store, Gary, who, shockingly, is not a man. And we see Al do the unthinkable, grovel to a woman.
Please, please don't fire me. I'm just a major stroke away from a comfortable retirement.
This expanding world, with more guys joining Al's anti-woman group, like Bob Rooney and Ike, are being offset by female characters who think they're a bunch of idiots. The lines are being drawn in this world. At the time, No Ma'am was so popular that E.E. Bell, the actor who played Bob Rooney, started a website that would let fans across the country register their own No Ma'am groups.
You write into me, tell me who your head honcho is and who the other guys in your branch are, and I'll list them on a web page. And that lasted about a year and a half till it got to where it was like 2 hours a night for me to just do the emails on this just to keep it up.
Although No Ma'am Mania was taking off, series co-creator Michael Moy, who returned to the show this season, wasn't too bothered by what that might mean.
Many fan mail, as much fan mail, from women as we would from guys. Nobody was worried about, Al and Al's ilk, dominating the country.
Moy even pitched a No Ma'am spin-off, though network executives balked at the idea of giving this group of characters a show of their own and didn't get nearly as far as other failed spin-off attempts. Speaking of failed spin-offs, this season featured another one, this one titled Radio Free Tremaine, which tried to get a show about a college radio station off the ground. It was notable for two things. The first, that it featured the return of David Garrison, once again playing Steve Rhodes. And second, in that it featured a very young Carrie Russell before she would star in Felicity. This spin-off never even got the courtesy of a 6-episode run. It was dead with the pilot. This will be David Garrison's last appearance on the series, though I prefer to remember him from his appearance a few episodes earlier in Get the Dodge Out of Hell, where he got one of the longest ovations in the series' history. Ron Leavitt, series co-creator, left Married with Children for good after the 9th season. He would move over to the WB, where he would help put together a Married with Children-esque sitcom named Unhappily Ever After. A modest success, reaching 100 episodes, but it was fittingly called a Married with Children ripoff. Without a doubt, the most difficult change in season 10 was one surrounding beloved family dog, Buck. We could see Buck getting older in previous seasons as he was slowly going blind and suffering some cognitive delay.
I've got to prove to him that I'm not senile. I know. I'll bury a bone. That'll show him. Now, if I can just find a bone... excuse me, madam.
In season 10, this all came to a head in the tragically titled Requiem for a Dead Briard. The episode opens with us learning that Buck has passed away. Luckily, this is merely Buck, the TV character, not the real dog, who got to appear in this episode where he goes to heaven. But this dog won't be going to heaven. He instead gets reincarnated as a puppy named Lucky. And this dog's family is... well...
Those voices sound oddly familiar. If I could just get these newborn eyes to focus...
Oh, baby.
This episode isn't much, but it ends on a sweet note from the producers wishing the dog who played Buck, also named Buck, the best of luck in his retirement. According to show co-creator Michael Moy, there was some concern over Buck as he was already 12 years old and was experiencing pain having to go up and down the stairs, so they thought it best that he be set free to enjoy some much-deserved rest. Later interviews with Buck reveal a possible sore point between him and Lucky.
I have nothing to say about Lucky.
Buck's replacement, Lucky, would continue to be voiced by Kevin Curran throughout the season, though by the 11th, the internal monologues would be dropped entirely. As for Buck, sadly he would pass away a week after the 10th season ended, hopefully in a happy place, and he will be fondly remembered as a very good boy. Married with Children was a trailblazer that included a few instances of trans representation. Although a smaller role in Season 9's Dud Bowl, we met the quarterback from Al's high school football team. We get the obligatory shocked moment from her former teammates, including a very creepy move by Al. But generally, the characters are pretty cool with it, particularly Peggy and Marcy.
And what's she doing here?
I am here in support of my sister-in-arms, Thad. I hope that she wins and somehow you don't.
Thad is able to take her old position of quarterback and is generally welcomed on the team. She not only gets to throw what would have been the winning touchdown, had Al not messed it up, but she even gets to punch out a transphobe.
I'm Thad. I'm Thor. Still got your arm, Thad?
You make the call.
This was fairly ahead of the curve for 1994. Season 10 gave us another trans character. Once again a trans woman, but this time instead of a cis man wearing a wig, this character was played by a cis female, Krista Allen. She's a student at Bud's college, who he's trying to convince to pose for a pinup calendar. We don't find out the truth about her until the end.
It's time for my family and the rest of the world to see the person I've become. Bud Bundy has made me proud to be a woman who was born a man.
Although we only ever find out this character is trans at the very end, as a punchline, what's interesting is how the show handles it. This could have led to some transphobic commentary, but instead we get silence. The message here is pretty clear, that society isn't ready for a trans woman, and the shock is overwhelming for these average cis men. Is it overtly transphobic, though? This episode firmly establishes that sexual attraction is entirely possible between cis and trans people, if only cis characters were willing to ignore their prejudices. It also, at the very least, makes trans people visible, not pretending they don't exist. But the unspoken side of things does highlight the dark side of trans acceptance in the mid-90s. It couldn't be overtly pro-trans, and in that silence, basic anti-trans assumptions reign supreme. Calendars fail, the guys are grossed out, and Bud is embarrassed, having made out with a trans woman. It makes my evaluation of "it could have been worse" seem a bit tepid. Also, though we did get 2 trans women characters in Married with Children, I didn't see any trans men, a group that suffered greatly from a lack of visibility, and that's still a problem we deal with today. The last note I have on Season 10 is the final attempt at a spin-off for the series, this time Enemies, a rough parody of Friends, starring Nicole Eggert and Matt Borlengi. It wasn't very good, aside from watching the Darcys try to speak to a black person.
Listen, Holmes. If you insist on dissing your customers in that manner, then we are just going to have to ease on down that road.
Word.
Yeah, but he's not here, so it's a no, Bundy.
Final season of the show ended things more on a whimper than a bang. Both of the show's creators had left at this point, and Fox showed a lack of care for the health of the series by moving its time slot several times throughout the season. A devastating move in an era when time slots created predictability for an audience, so they could manage their time in a way that let them watch their favorite shows. Ratings started to drop dramatically, and rising production costs meant this season would be the show's last. Not that anyone involved with the production had any idea. With the series creators both gone, Married with Children was without either of the voices that had guided it through the previous seasons. Al and Peg, who for the first time in 11 seasons, break things off in a 3-parter titled Breaking Up is Easy to Do. In it, a typical marital spat, where Al reveals that he's forgotten the first time he and Peg had sex, eventually leads to disaster.
It sure is. I'm moving out, Peg.
And much like that empty promise to shave those shoulders, I'll believe it when I see it.
You'll be wishing you had these shaggy shoulders to cry on, Peg.
We then see Al and Peg try to enjoy their lives as single people.
Whoa!
Al eventually tries to win back Peg from her new boyfriend, Bruce, played by Alan Thicke.
Gee, Peg, you really have a new boyfriend.
Well, this is an awkward moment. Fortunately, I'm so self-centered, it's not going to bother me.
When the kids find out their new stepdad expects them to get jobs, they use some Bundy-style rhetoric to get rid of him. And eventually, Al and Peg patch things up. A surprisingly sweet episode, at least for any other season, but season 11 was unusually sweet overall. Maybe it was the show's creators being gone for good, but the show definitely felt like it lost much of its cynical edge at this point. While no one wants to see Al and Peg split up, the way they got back together seemed almost maudlin. It could have worked in any other season, but this one was already so filled with sentimental moments that it just got lost in a sea of sappiness. At least by Married with Children standards. The last 2-parter of the series, often mistakenly thought of as the finale, features Kelly falling in love with a rich man, Lonnie, played by Charles Eston. They meet when Lonnie's soon-to-be ex takes the Bundy family hostage. Lonnie very quickly proposes.
Kelly, this is not how I dreamt of this moment. But neither could I have dreamt of meeting someone as beautiful and perfect and smart as you. Kelly Bundy, will you marry me?
I thought you'd never ask.
Kelly soon gives up her promiscuous ways.
I love Lonnie so much that it's worth giving up all those guys.
But Al learns that Lonnie doesn't respect Kelly after seeing him at the nudie bar.
See, your future wife deserves more respect.
Well, what about your wife?
That's different. My wife is my wife, and your wife is my daughter.
But eventually, Lonnie makes a move on Marcy, and everything begins to crumble.
Okay, that's it. This wedding's off.
Well, I said he was fickle. All of us tots are.
We believe that marriage should be forever. And anyone who can't stand the nagging, bonbon-eating heat should stay out of the whining, sex-starved kitchen.
You tell him, Al.
Mom, He just called you fat and whiny.
Oh. Well, I just heard the part about staying out of the kitchen.
This would have been a fitting finale. The institution of marriage is upheld as requiring love and not being an expression of temporary lust. We get some Bundy unity and some commentary on the rich seeing people as disposable commodities, even husbands and wives, while the poor stay together because they need one another to get through tough times. Marriage is something you should only do if you can withstand the challenge. Not a bad sentiment, but some marriages should end, and the fact that poor people have to cling together to withstand those bad times, as seen in the many ways the Bundys band together to fight outside threats, keeps these toxic relationships going. Or more accurately, makes these loving relationships toxic. When you're in a loving unit, embattled by the harsh world around you, it's hard not to let some of that harsh world seep inside yourself and affect the people around you. It would have been a decent enough ending, but there would be one more episode for the series, a forgettable caper involving Al bartering shoes. Although the episode did end on a pretty cool final scene. Married with Children came to an end.
Someone else heard it on the radio and then called me to tell me that the show was canceled. I'm like, wow, 11 years, and I find out from Mark and Brian, that's a trip.
I was in Ohio at a bed and breakfast, and a honeymoon couple approached me in the parking lot as I was getting in my car and said, we're sorry about the show. I said, really? Oh, you didn't know? It's on TV, it was canceled. So I said, oh, really? So you got married? I took him in that bottom and drank a little champagne. I said, I prefer to hear it from you.
You think a show that ran as long as it did, that had the impact that it had on launching a network, might have been sent off with a little more hurrah, but, you know, business is business.
So we never got a final episode, which I thought was extremely unfair, seeing as we were one of the first shows there. I mean, we were at the network before The Simpsons were there.
Although we never got a final episode, the cast did share a few of their ideas of how it all should have ended.
I'd like to see everybody blown up.
Al wins the lottery, and for like 20 million, you pick a number, and they're dancing around in the living room, and like a tornado comes in, like the Wizard of Oz, you know, and then all that's left is a big hole.
And the house comes back down on, you know, Marcy's body, and you just see her little feet coming out.
Whatever would happen, Jefferson would end up by himself on an island with a cocktail with an umbrella and several bikini-clad women, and living the good life, and the rest of them would be, you know, in hell somewhere.
That's one desperate little chimp, huh?
The through line of this series I found most prominent was the evolution of Al, going from the loser the audience laughed at to the loser audience grew to love and support, and while Al himself changed very little, the audience around him seemed to more closely align with how he saw the world. I don't think Married with Children mainstreamed reactionary politics, though. More likely, I think it attracted people already inclined towards them. The series tapped into the very real feelings people had and continue to have. The feelings of people who once felt the world was their birthright, suddenly realizing that life isn't going to turn out the way they thought it would. In that way, Married with Children can help contextualize this feeling in a way that perhaps isn't helpful when it's just being mocked. Sure, we can laugh at how silly Al and the other Bundys are, but can we not want them to do better too? And maybe do better in a way that isn't just tearing down the people around them. Maybe it can help motivate us to try and make a better world where people won't feel a connection to families like the Bundys. As much as we like to pretend these bitter feelings of the Bundys don't exist, they have a way of encroaching into our lives, and that's what this show does so well. It screams at the audience, letting us know that these people exist, they live amongst us, and to some of us, it may be downright relatable. And as a small coda to that though, there is a wonderful irony in a show giving voice to the voiceless reactionary working class white man. Even though there aren't many characters like the Bundys on TV, they still got to have a show. Other marginalized groups, even some depicted on the show, weren't so lucky. I've often heard it said that shows like Married with Children could never be put on the air today because of how politically correct everything is. That's sort of true, but the only reason it got on the air in the 80s was because it slid through the cracks of an upstart network. Married with Children in many ways set the tone for Fox, being raunchy and rude. It paved the way for future unconventional sitcoms such as The Simpsons and Malcolm in the Middle, with their unconventional takes on the family dynamic. The stars of the show mostly had success following the end of the series. Ed O'Neill started a handful of projects, and it was at one point nearly cast as Al Swearingen on HBO's Deadwood. The role had actually been written for him by the series creator, but apparently his time on Married with Children had too closely associated him with Al Bundy, a running theme over the years in his career. O'Neill did eventually get cast on Modern Family, which went on to run for 11 seasons, just like Married with Children, although Modern Family was a few episodes shorter when it ended in 2020. Also, one of my favorite fun facts about Ed O'Neill is his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame is in front of a shoe store. Katie Sagal would go on to appear in a number of shows, including 8 Simple Rules, where she starred opposite John Ritter for 3 seasons. She probably had her most lauded performance, though, as Gemma in Sons of Anarchy, which ran for 7 seasons. I'll probably remember her most fondly as the voice of Leela on Futurama.
Al, I did my hair the way you wanted it. Who are these people?
Friends.
Hey, where'd you get this couch and that TV set and all this stuff?
They were giving it away on the street corner. Just like you, Leela.
Too bad they weren't giving away the 3 things you actually need. Mouthwash, a back wax, and stain-proof underwear.
You go, girl!
Christina Applegate was the breakout star after Married with Children ended. She starred in Jessie, Samantha Who, Up All Night, and a number of other roles on TV and film, but she never quite landed in a project that made use of her talents. However, she did have one very important triumph. When she was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2008, she would undergo a double mastectomy. Quite happily, she was able to make a recovery and is currently cancer-free. Most recently, she's starring in the Netflix series Dead to Me. David Faustino's career post-Married with Children has been a bit more low-key, although he did have the singular honor of working alongside Jon Bon Jovi in 2006's National Lampoon's Pucked. He did star in his own original web series, Starving, which ran for 2 seasons, and featured cameos from Married with Children castmates. Faustino currently works as a DJ. Amanda Bearse would transition into a directorial role, only occasionally taking a few small acting jobs. She eventually moved east, leaving Hollywood and most of the world of show business behind her. Of all the cast members, she seems the least connected to her previous role. David Garrison's return to the world of theater saw him starring in a number of productions, though most notably he played the Wizard in the Broadway production of Wicked. Though he would often get called back to the world of TV to do a few guest spots on various programs, he managed to split his time appearing in a number of different stage productions as well. Bearse and Garrison had a very weird cameo together in 2001 on the TV series Nikki. The series starred Nikki Cox, who got her first major role on Unhappily Ever After, which was created by Married with Children co-creator Ron Leavitt. Bearse and Garrison reprised their roles as the Rhodeses. Ted McGinley would continue his lengthy career on TV, most notably joining a sitcom at the beginning of its run for a change, when he starred alongside Faith Ford and Kelly Ripa in Hope and Faith. More recently, he seems to have cashed in on the Christian movie circuit, appearing in films such as Christmas with a capital C, Do You Believe, and God's Not Dead, A Light in Darkness. The show's co-creator, Ron Leavitt, sadly passed away in 2008 of lung cancer. The last project he worked on was the WB's The Help. He's survived by his 2 children and his partner, who he met while filming Married with Children. Michael Moy, the other co-creator of the show, has largely left the world of show business. He very much felt like the encroachment of political correctness was stifling the brand of comedy he enjoyed, so for his own sanity, he retired and currently lives happily with his family.
You know, I can't write a sitcom or any type of comedy if I now have to factor in that this just may offend someone, because I've always thought by its very nature, comedy has to kind of be slightly offensive. Doesn't have to be mean-spirited. You don't sit there and just tear down someone.
Though there have been rumblings about a Married with Children reboot, most notably one rumored in 2016 starring David Faustino, it hasn't quite materialized. From what little I could find about the subject, there seems to be some kind of legal dispute around Ron Leavitt's estate preventing it from happening. With much of the cast available, aside from possibly Christina Applegate, it seems like the perfect time for a reunion. So far, that just doesn't seem to be in the cards, though. Married with Children would live on in the world of syndication for decades, but it also found life around the world in a number of international versions of the show. There were Married with Children remakes from over a dozen countries. The UK version gave us the rare treat of an American show being shipped overseas to be ruined by local TV producers. Here's an excruciating clip.
With what I earn, I keep you in bleach, I keep you in binoculars, I keep you instead of someone I'd rather be married to. And I pay my national insurance for a nice little pension at the end of it all.
At school, they said by the time you retire, there won't be any state pensions.
You're not going to come and live with us, are you, Dad?
Did I tell you today that I love you?
No.
Exactly. So why should I choose to live with you when I can sleep rough and die of exposure?
The UK series mercifully only lasted 7 episodes. The other versions had varying degrees of success, though none did as well as the Russian version, which ran for 6 seasons, totaling 365 episodes. The series adapted episodes from the original version of the show, but when they ran out, they had a contest where fans sent in their own original ideas. They even managed to get a few original episodes from the original writing staff of the American version of Married with Children. Al Bundy will go down in history as an iconic TV character, as part of a series that shaped a network and took the sitcom format in a bold new direction. It's a series of its time that's somehow timeless, so long as there is an angry man sitting on his couch, bitter that the world just isn't what it used to be. Al Bundy will speak to that person. There's one popular clip of the show on YouTube where Al Bundy sums up his life in depressing fashion. It's taken from a season 3 episode. He thought he could.
Every morning when I wake up, I know it's not going to get any better until I go back to sleep again. So I get up, have my watered-down Tang and still frozen Pop-Tart, get in my car with no upholstery, no gas, and 6 more payments to fight traffic just for the privilege of putting cheap shoes on the cloven hooves of people like you. I'll never play football like I thought I would. I'll never know the touch of a beautiful woman. And I'll never again know the joy of driving without a bag on my head. But I'm not a loser. Because despite it all, me and every other guy who will never be what he wanted to be are still out there being what we don't want to be 40 hours a week for life. And the fact that I haven't put a gun in my mouth, you pudding of a woman, makes me a winner.
The speech is the moment that takes Al from the loser we laugh at to the loser we cheer for. This sort of speech would fall flat to deaf ears, but for one of Al's fellow travelers, or one who just admires his gumption, it's the bitter scream to the world to remind them that people like Al still exist. They're here, and they're daring us with the question, what are you going to do about it? This was, by far, the largest project I've ever worked on. It is not only the longest script, it is the most content I've ever had to watch for a video. Nearly 260 episodes of television and multiple TV specials, news articles, and all sorts of behind-the-scenes bits of information that I had to consume for this one. It was made possible by the generous donations of my patrons, whose names you can see on the screen now. If you'd like to be one of these fine people, you can head over to my Patreon and donate. $5 tier will also get you a download of my theme song and advance access to future videos like this one. If you'd like to support this channel in a way that doesn't cost you anything, you can like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell. I appreciate it. Anyone who does so has my thanks. Anyone who watches this video has my thanks. Basically, just thank you everyone.